Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Chee-Tash. My name is Chris, and today we're going to be talking about 1984. Continuing on with Chapter 1, going on to Part 5, pages 49 through 65 of my edition. What a part this one was. We get introduced to Winston in the cafeteria of the Ministry of Truth, and it seems like every part so far has been a different aspect of Winston's life. That's been kind of cool. You've seen Winston at his house. You've seen Winston interacting with his neighbors. You've seen Winston getting ready for work. You've seen Winston at work. Now you're seeing Winston at the cafeteria or canteen, as it's called, and we're just gathering more and more information about Winston, about where he lives, Big Brother, some other cast of characters. This was a cool part of Chapter 1, and I say let's just start right off with describing the environment that Winston finds himself in. He's at work. He's working in the records department. He's rectifying messages, right? And it's lunchtime, because you got to eat. So he goes to the canteen in the ministry. And what is the canteen? Well, it's essentially, like I said, it's the lunchroom. It's the cafeteria. People go to eat here, and the food is not great by what I can tell by Winston's description. First off, the place is very loud. Very, very loud. And Winston describes that everything seems like very crammed in together. Like people are sitting shoulder to shoulder. It almost feels like a prison cafeteria in a way. Everything's metallic. Everything's kind of greasy and slimy, I think is how he describes it. The food, not very good at all. They serve stew. They have Victory gin there, so you're drinking on the job. That's kind of interesting. Bread and cheese. They have Victory coffee and a saccharin tablet. I don't know what that is. I think it's like a sugar pill or like a sugar cube, I think. But it seems like Winston gives the impression that they only serve this every day. Like they're serving the same things. Doesn't seem like he brings a lunch. So they are eating this weird stew, which he doesn't like. They have like a unit of bread, cheese, and a saccharin tablet, and then they have access to Victory coffee and Victory gin. And I put there in that one bullet point, it's interesting they don't call it Victory stew, but they do say Victory cigarettes, mansions, gin, coffee. There's victories over your memory. But why isn't it Victory stew? I thought that was kind of interesting. Why don't they do that? I don't know. Maybe I could venture a guess. Like all those other things are kind of staples. But again, a mansion, I mean, you'd figure shelter is kind of a staple. Because you would say gin and coffee. You don't really need those. And cigarettes, I don't know. That is weird why they don't call everything Victory. Or why some things are called Victory, but others aren't. So anyway, Winston comes in to the canteen. You get in the lunch queue. So if you think about like a phone queue, you get in like a line. It almost seems like a conveyor belt. So you have to grab plates when you get to the plate portion of the lunch queue, and then it transports you down the line, and then you get in front of the stew. It's kind of like a lunch lady, She says like, hand out your plate and stuff a bowl of stew on your lunch tray, and then you continue down, and then you have a chance to get bread, and then you just keep going down the line. And like I said, it sounds like the same food is served every day in not a great environment. Like I said, slimy, greasy, smelly, messy. Just wouldn't be my ideal place to eat lunch. I would personally bring a lunch if I was working at the Ministry of Truth. I would not want to eat in this canteen. But I guess one of the benefits of eating in the canteen is you get to see people. It doesn't really seem like people really talk to each other, but we are going to see Winston interact with some people that you might seem like they are friends, but they're really not. You got to remember, everybody here is a comrade. Basically, that's how you have to refer to everyone. They're not your neighbors, they're your comrades. They're not your friends, they're your comrades. This first guy we meet is very interesting. Syme. Syme. And again, he's not really a friend. Although he does know Winston, and it seems like they talk quite a bit. But Winston doesn't really think Syme likes him. What does Syme do exactly? Well, he's an expert in Newspeak. He's a philologist, and he's right now currently working on the 11th edition of the Newspeak dictionary. So he's an expert in this weird language that's called Newspeak, which we see Winston interact with in the previous part. As part of his job, the messages that come to Winston's cubicle are in Newspeak. So he has to kind of translate them, or he translates the messages for us so we know what Big Brother is expecting from Winston when it comes to rectifying these messages. Very weird language. Syme is working on that. Interesting cat. He's small, dark hair. He's got large eyes, and those eyes are used to like pierce deeply into Winston's soul. It's like Winston gives the impression that Syme is like waiting for him to trip up, because he's kind of paranoid that Syme would maybe one day give him up to the thought police. Like, Syme would totally rat him out. Winston's not shy about saying this. So he tries to avoid Winston's scrutinizing eyes. He does this later in the part 2, and he kind of states that you have to be careful with the impressions that you give off, because people will pick up on it, and they'll think that you're up to no good, and they can use that as a reason to give you up to the thought police, which is actually something he calls a face crime. That's why he says later on in this part, in part 5, you got to be really careful with how you like portray yourself. You don't want to act like suspicious or, act like you're plotting. You just want to act happy. Hey, we're in Oceania. We're being led by Big Brother. There's no time. You smile. What do you got to lose? You're living a good life. You're here in Oceania. So that's Syme. Let's see. I got another bullet point here. There we go. It's weird that Syme, he's this guy, expert, seems like super educated. We're going to hear him talk about Newspeak. And yet he takes joy in these violent acts, these hangings and executions, the public confessions of thought criminals. He actually states in here in part 5 that when he's describing one of these hangings, he describes it as, right here, page 51. It was a good hanging. I think it spoils it when they tie their feet together. I like see them kicking, and above all, at the end, the tongue sticking right out. Like, Jesus, who is this guy that enjoys this kind of stuff? He's kind of like messed up in the head, if you ask me a little bit. Like, we don't hear Winston talking about him like this. Who we do hear talking kind of like this is the Parsons kids, when they're violently like pretending like they're attacking Winston, like they're gonna like shoot him with their wooden pistols, their wooden toy guns. So it's weird. Like, yeah, Syme takes pleasure in this, and Winston describes him as venomously orthodox, like he's like by the book. But ultimately, that by the book thinking is something that Winston mentions that he thinks will eventually get him vaporized. Not saying it's going to happen. He thinks it will eventually get him vaporized. Because Syme, look, he's an expert in this Newspeak, highly intelligent, probably picks up on a lot of things that maybe Winston might not know, takes his job really seriously. He's too intelligent, though. He sees things too clearly. And we're going to kind of see that with what he talks to Winston about, which is the dictionary that he's building, that he's helping to create. But he is way too intelligent, and we've heard Winston say that the party will actually get rid of people within the party, within those upper echelons of the party, they'll actually vaporize those people if they know a little too much or they get a little too popular. I think this was like in part 4 or 3, Winston mentions something like this. And you can kind of see this with Syme in just the way that he talks about Newspeak. He knows a little too much to where if he were ever compromised, he would have information that would potentially maybe be the downfall of the party. So he never has any stupidity. He says things that are just better left unsaid, and he frequents this place called the Chestnut Tree Cafe, which we hear that is a place where Goldstein and his cronies, well, really, they're kind of the good guys, they have frequented before. So it's not that it's a bad place, but just kind of guilt by association, because Goldstein used to hang out there and Syme usually hangs out there. Well, it could be reason to just vaporize him for that. Who knows? That would seem like something Big Brother would do. So this Newspeak dictionary that Syme is working on, it's going to be the 11th edition. And let me tell you, dude, this edition is going to be the definitive edition. Syme raves about it. You can tell he likes doing what he does. And this 11th edition is going to be the definitive edition. It's going to eradicate all the words that they know of currently. It's going to produce a whole new language. And actually, everything that they're speaking right now when Winston and Syme are talking is going to be considered old speak. They're actually, instead of adding... It's not that they're adding new words. Here's the thing. They're actually getting rid of words. He describes this, I think it was on page 52, where he says, "You think, I dare say, that our chief job is inventing new words, but not a bit. We're destroying words. Scores of them, hundreds of them every day. We're cutting the language down to the bone." Interesting, right? As he goes on to explain, there's no need for some of these words. Listen to how he describes this. He actually says that why have words that mean the opposite of something when the word that you are describing, that is the word that you use to get to the opposite of, you don't need it. You can just use, for example, I don't know if I'm really describing that correctly, but it's kind of confusing. But, all right, take, for example, good and bad, right? Well, okay, good is very positive, bad, very negative. But we don't need negatives because this is Oceania and we're living under the party and Big Brother. So we don't have time for bad. We're not going to use bad because we already have good. So why not say anything that's bad is ungood? Anything that's way better than good is plus good. You're eliminating the need for any more descriptive language here. Any more specifics of the language. And he actually states this whole notion of goodness and badness will be covered in 6 words instead of, the many hundreds of words that you can use to convey if something's good, really good, outstanding, spectacular, fantastic. No need for those words. Just say plus good, and people will know what you're talking about. Right? They're getting rid of words because they're trying to control consciousness. And this is all Big Brother's idea. Syme gives credit to Big Brother. And actually, they go on and keep talking and say that the language of Oceania just gets smaller every year. And by that fact, the consciousness gets smaller every year. And really, the whole goal of Newspeak that Syme is talking about here is to narrow the range of thought, where you have one word describing multiple things and Orthodoxy means you don't think. You don't have to think about how good you are. You're just good. And if you're better than good, then you're plus good. And that's it. You don't have to think about it. So think about how much language controls thoughts. And they're going to narrow your range of thoughts by narrowing the language that you can use. Oh, and I'm sure if you go outside of that language, you might not be a thought criminal, but you'll stand out. And that's not going to be good if you stand out by using old speak, the old language that Syme and Winston are currently using. No, you can use it, but you're going to stand out like a sore thumb, and that's going to give reason for the spies or Big Brother to place more scrutiny on you. I'm just, kind of spitballing there, but I can just kind of see that is where this is going. And we're actually going to have a story about that coming up here a few slides down. On page, what was this? 55. We're introduced to this very interesting man. I almost don't even think this guy is real. The Quacking Man. The Quacking Man is literally a guy that is sitting at the table next to Winston and Syme in the canteen, and he just talks and talks and talks. But here's the thing. It's not that he's talking, because Winston describes it as it's not speech, it's just noise. It's a strident voice that's just loud, harsh, and grating. And it's almost like it's on a repeat. It's like a record player. It's just repeating. Oh, I don't know if it's repeating because you can't. Winston says you can't really tell what the Quacking Man is saying, but he's saying stuff at such a rapid rate and just spewing out just noise that it actually sounds like he's a duck and he's quacking. And Syme actually calls this duck speak. He actually says that duck speak, if you're referring to it, it can both mean something very positive and very negative. So if you're referring to somebody you're critical of or don't like, duck speak could be interpreted as a very negative thing, but you can also use it in a very positive light too. So it's interesting. Newspeak, duck speak. It's kind of funny. Who is the guy though? We don't really know. Winston says he thinks plays an important part in the fiction department, and he describes him as having a muscular throat, which I think would be a requirement if you're just talking and talking and talking and you're going on and on and on. You got to have some strong pipes, a strong, voice box to just keep doing that. He had a large mobile mouth, and then very interestingly, he had, instead of eyes, 2 blank discs. And I can just imagine like dinner plates for eyes that are just black. It's almost like he can't even see. He's not even supposed to see. All he does, he's just supposed to talk. No use for any eyes. And then the last thing, he's sitting with a young woman, which we're going to find out in a few slides who that young woman is. But before then, we see Tom Parsons come in and meet Syme and Winston at the cafeteria table. So we finally get to meet Tom Parsons. We heard about him in part 2, and we finally get to meet him, and he is tubby. He is very tubby. It's like one of the first things Winston uses to describe him, or George Orwell uses to describe him. And I'm reminded of, if you guys remember that movie Major Payne, where he's like, one tubby. That's kind of what this reminded me of. He's got a frog-like face. Even though he's fat, he's got some boyish movements. It seems like he's just like a kid alt, is how I'm picturing this. He's a little boy grown large. He's an adult, but he still acts like a little kid. Even though he dresses just like Winston's dressed in those blue overalls, but Winston says that he can't help but see him still with the red neckerchief and the gray attire that spies wear. And who are spies? They're usually kids, like Tom's kids are spies. He sweats a ton. That's kind of disgusting. He's also in charge of subscriptions, or he calls it a sub. And a subscription means like a, it could be, I guess, charity, but like a fees, I guess. Not taxes, but yeah, I guess that would, initiation fees. Dues. Yeah, like league dues if you're playing fantasy football. Dues, community dues, I guess, is how you would call it. He talks about his kids a lot. He refers to them as beggars. Actually, I'm going to check that because he calls them out a few times for doing like a great job. Like, oh, my kids are doing so great. And he tells a story about his daughter ratting out somebody who just had the wrong pair of shoes. That's what I was going to get to, that I was kind of mentioning earlier. Yeah, he calls them mischievous little beggars. Like, he talks about his kids in a way that I don't think parents usually talk about their kids. It's weird. It's almost like he's talking about them as they are like recruits. Like, oh, they're doing such a good job and they're going to go on to do great things for the party. But he doesn't say like anything about, oh, I love my kids so much for the work they do. No, and maybe it's because Tom realizes that they're going to grow up someday and they might, or not that they would grow up, but that they may one day rat him out and cause Tom and his wife to be vaporized. So he tells this story about his daughter tracking down a man for just wearing shoes that she had never seen before. And he says that his kids were making sure that he wasn't some kind of enemy agent. And then Winston says, well, what happened to him? And Tom kind of implies that he was vaporized just for wearing different shoes that his kids were not accustomed to seeing. It's kind of weird. Winston mentions that Parsons is a person that would never be vaporized. But it's interesting that he mentions that Syme is somebody that would be vaporized. And I think it's important to note how each of them acts. What's the intelligence level of both? Right? And that might be a discussion question, so I'll kind of leave that hanging on the edge. So the girl with the dark hair, if you guys remember, Chapter 1, Part 1, we're introduced to the girl with dark hair. Winston says that he does not really like her. He thinks she's up to something. He almost thinks like she is spying on him. And guess who is sitting next to that quacking man that we were referring to earlier? Well, it's the girl with the dark hair. And again, Winston thinks she works in the fiction department. He doesn't know her name, but he catches her in the canteen staring at him. And all of a sudden, he gets super scared because he doesn't know how long she's been staring at him. Come to find out that the day before, she's sitting behind him at the 2 Minutes of Hate. If you guys remember the 2 Minutes of Hate from Part 1, where they're screaming at Goldstein, everybody's gathered around. So Winston's kind of getting a little weirded out that she sat behind him at the 2 Minutes of Hate and now she's caught staring at him in the canteen. He thinks that she's keeping track of him. I don't know. It could be a coincidence. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. Hopefully we get to know a little bit more about the girl with the dark hair. Because my inclination is to think that, yeah, she might be tracking him. She might be a bad guy. She might be part of the spies or what have you, working for the party. I guess everybody works for the party, but you know what I mean. So that's kind of the cast of characters that we are introduced to in the canteen. All of a sudden, while they're in the canteen, Tom, Syme, and Winston are talking, and all of a sudden there's this telescreen announcement where they announce that the standard of living has increased. And they're producing a ton. The battle of production is being won. And it's interesting to see the reaction of Parsons versus the reaction of Winston. And Winston actually kind of describes that Parsons is sitting there listening intently to the telescreen announcement, and he just has a blind belief. He's just taking it all in, soaking it all in, not asking any questions. People are celebrating. They're parading. They actually, I think, stop work at some of the places in order to have like a, page 59. Workers marched out of factories and offices and paraded through the streets with banners voicing their gratitude for Big Brother for the new happy life. New happy life. That's interesting. Winston realizes, though, that it's all kind of bullshit. It's all kind of a farce. And his reaction is, well, do you remember when they said that they wouldn't reduce the chocolate ration, but they ended up doing it? And he starts to think like, oh my God, like most people are like Tom Parsons. They just have this blind belief. But Winston starts to ask the question if he's the only person with the memory of the previous, whenever they announced it, telescreen announcement on the chocolate ration, because he remembers them saying one thing about it and now they're saying something completely different. And he's kind of asking the question, am I the only one that notices this? And you can tell he's getting really fed up. This is on page 61 here. He's getting really fed up about a lot of things because he thinks he's being cheated out of something. Cheated out of probably like a better life. He has a ton of disgust. The food is shitty. The canteen is terrible. He really likes his job, though, according to part 4. Remember we were reading that? He really likes that line of work, rectifying messages. But he has just some sort of disgust, which is interesting because in order to have disgust, you had to have experienced something better. So what is he comparing that to? Right? So his memory must not be so bad. He does remember things from maybe his childhood where things were completely different. But he describes it on page 61. Always in your stomach and in your skin, there was a sort of protest, a feeling that you had been cheated out of something that you had a right to. It was true that he had no memories of anything greatly different. In any time that he could accurately remember, there had never been quite enough to eat. One had never had socks. And he goes through like this long list of just bad stuff he has to deal with. Holes in his socks, rickety rooms, trains are crowded, lifts that never worked, cold water. Why should one feel it to be intolerable unless one had some kind of ancestral memory that things had once been different? So again, where is he comparing this to? Right. I mean, the people seem awful. Just from talking to like Syme, talking to Parsons, he says everybody is ugly. All like the common people are ugly. But then the members of the party, they seemingly look great. They're chiseled. They have nice features. They're probably stocky, muscular, beautiful women. But it's funny because that's like not what most people are. Most people kind of look a little bit like Syme. They're small. They're dark. He describes one guy in the cafeteria as beetle-like. And he says that these people flourish the best under the party, which I'm guessing means that they don't talk, they don't ask questions, they just go about their day. Unlike Syme knows a lot of information and he doesn't know when to stop talking. But these beetle-like people that he describes, it was the type that seemed to flourish best under the dominion of the party. Excuse me. What a cast of characters that we were introduced to here in part 5. And hopefully we find a little bit more about that girl from the fiction department. That'll be interesting. Here are the discussion questions for Chapter 1, Part 5. And again, these will be posted exclusively on the Chee-Tash blog. So go there if you want to see my responses to these questions. Compare the people Winston says would get vaporized to those he thinks will not. Do you think Tom Parsons loves his kids? Look at the way he is describing them. Give your thoughts on the Newspeak dictionary. How can it be used to control Oceania? We talked about that. What do you notice about the way Tom asks Winston for his sub? We didn't really cover this, but if you guys go back and look at that exchange, he asks him for his sub. There's like a community thing. Did I put the page number there? No, but here, I can give you guys the page number. 58. There's a sub house by house fund. Treasure for a block will make an all-out effort. They're putting on a show. They're having banners, flags all over the place. Yeah, what do you notice about that exchange? And I'll just leave it at that. Do you think he's using doublethink reality control? Go back and take a look. Let me know what you think. Do you think the strange man, Tom's daughter followed was actually an enemy of the state, the guy who wore the wrong shoes? The Quacking Man, is he even human? Why don't you think he has any eyes? Let me know what you think. And guys, that's going to do it for this episode of 1984 on Chee-Tash. Next week, Chapter 1, Part 6, which will be from page 65 to, let me see if I can give you guys a quick page count. Oh, this one's short, 65 through 71. Let's do that. Let's just do Part 6, and then maybe in the future, I might double up on the parts if they're going to be that short. But let's just do that. Part 6 for next time. And we'll have the discussion questions too later this week. Again, exclusively on the blog. I'll post these in the description. But let me know what you guys think. What are your thoughts on these discussion questions? And that's going to wrap it up. Guys, thank you so much for listening. I really, really appreciate it. If you have any questions, you want to talk, banter back and forth on 1984, it's a cool book so far. Let me know. Leave a comment. Please like and subscribe. Till then, my name is Chris. This has been Chee-Tash. Take care.